The story started at an adventurer guild called the True Heroes. The Guildmaster Iranx told an adventurer he could no longer stay. He claimed the guild did not need someone as incapable as him. Act Enge, the adventurer, felt shock. He could not understand the reason. He had made good contributions to the guild and struggled to believe they would suddenly dismiss him. Act quickly stood up. He tried to argue against the decision, but the Guildmaster kept insisting that the guild could not keep people who were not useful. Security guards grabbed Act by the arms and pulled him toward the door. He struggled and pleaded with them to stop and talk more about the matter, but it was no use. Act asked what he should do afterward. The Guildmaster claimed it was not his problem. They forcefully threw Act out through the main guild door. He was no longer a part of the guild. A few years passed by. In the kingdom of Gator Nygard, in the city of Noetz, a knock sounded on the Guildmaster's office door in the Adventurer Guild of Heaven's Gem. A visitor named Cage asked for the Guildmaster, who turned out to be Act, our protagonist. When Act told him to come in, he thought about his previous employer's words, and the painful memory of his own exile still remaining in his mind. That day long ago, he had been unfairly kicked out of his old guild. Because of that experience, he had promised himself he would never treat anyone with such cruelty. When the blacksmith Cage came into the office, Act spoke bluntly, telling the boy he did not need to come back. Act said Cage was not useful to the current guild. The blacksmith looked at the Guildmaster in confusion and started mentioning that he had been helping the guild this whole time. Act stood firm, stating he would not repeat what he said, and that Cage should just get out of his sight. The younger man tried to protest, but Act's manner showed clearly that he would not listen to any arguments. In this thoughts, Act reasoned that there was a limit to everything. It was pointless to keep a person around who had talent but was no longer needed for the specific needs of the guild. The blacksmith sadly asked what he should do now, explaining that he had no family or contacts. He worried that being expelled would leave him homeless. The Guildmaster explained that he had prepared a position for Cage as the deputy director at the royal capital's main branch of another group, the Blacksmith Guild known as the Hammer of the War God. Cage, surprised, asked for details. Frederica, Act's personal maid, decided to explain what her master meant. She claimed he found a better job for him. Act, a bit annoyed, told his maid not to speak for him. He faced the blacksmith again and explained that a friend of his was looking for someone who could help them. Cage had improved his blacksmithing skills under him and reached a certain level. Act believed he should now use his ability in a new environment. Act directed Frederica to give Cage all the necessary papers. The maid handed over the documents and Cage looked very confused about what was happening. Act recalled that Cage was getting married soon, and it would be more effective to have a steady income as a deputy director than working at the current guild. Act offered to pay for his moving expenses and other costs. If the blacksmith agreed, he should go out and leave already. Once Cage was able to think clearly again, he read the documents. He thanked Act with great happiness. He had never expected it was actually for his own sake. Act warned him not to misunderstand the situation. The move was not for Cage's benefit. He insisted that a blacksmith was not useful in an adventurer's guild. Act added that wasting Cage's talent would hurt society as a whole. Frederica thought that Act simply could not be honest about his true feelings. Cage apologized to Act, saying he had not repaid the kindness shown to him. He thanked Act for taking him in despite his lack of skill, never making him feel shame, and for helping him find and grow his talent for blacksmithing, which he had not known he possessed. Act told him not to think about what he was leaving behind. Instead, Cage should focus on quickly adjusting to his new job. Act reminded him he was no longer part of the guild and should simply leave without worry. Cage looked at Act with surprise and gratitude, thanking him for the help. The blacksmith promised he would never forget Act's kindness and would work hard to repay him 100 times over. Act told him to try his best. Cage confirmed he would, and they said their goodbyes. After the blacksmith departed, Frederica asked Act if the situation had finished well. She mentioned that Cage had been helpful and suggested Act might have made a mistake in letting him go. Act replied that everything was fine since his left eye was telling him that Cage would achieve great things one of these days. He predicted that one day, Cage would succeed and become the leader of a major organization. Act explained that he simply saw this as the most profitable way to get back his original investment. The maid replied that she understood Act's thinking. Act continued, comparing the situation to releasing small fish into the ocean to fatten them up so they could be caught later in better condition. He noted that Cage himself benefited from this exclusion, so he would not be angry about being forced to leave. Frederica applauded the Guildmaster, saying he was skilled at acting to be the corrupted Guildmaster. However, Act was confused about something. He asked why Cage was being thankful toward him. He banished him out of nowhere and had a debt to repay. He can understand if Cage was just being formal, but he don't understand why he was that thankful toward him. The maid stated that she now knew he was truly a villain. Act asked, with a touch of irony, if that was meant as a good thing. She replied that it was. She added that he was an excellent guildmaster, of that she was certain. Act looked at her without speaking, then asked what was next. He remembered he planned to survey the nearby area. Frederica confirmed this and also mentioned a dinner event scheduled for 5 o'clock. Act remembered the words of the person who had expelled him from his first guild a few years earlier. On that day, he was unfairly kicked out. Because of that, he decided he would never become cruel like that person. He would not let anyone else go through what he did. For this reason, he started the guild named Heaven's Gem. It was a guild for people who had been unfairly banished, where he could gather them, train them, and then send them back out into the world. On the western continent of the world, different human and non-human races lived in their own countries. One of these was the human kingdom of Getter Nygard. A government meeting was taking place to discuss defeating the demon lord who became more of a threat each day. King Joseph of Getter Nygard spoke. After discussion, they agreed that a fellow named Lawrence would be the brave man to subjugate the demon lord. The king asked if anyone disagreed. An aide of the king spoke up. He explained that Lawrence had the strength, magic, and inner focus needed for victory. He would surely meet their hopes. The only problem was that he was too strong. The king and the others were confused, though he agreed that Lawrence really possessed an exceptional amount of strength. Lawrence was so overpowered that there weren't anyone suited to be his teammates. Allies were important for defeating the demon lord. He was skilled enough to subjugate a dragon alone. Princess Alistella was shocked. She recalled even a party of high-ranking adventurers would struggle against a single dragon. The others wondered how they could find teammates that matched Lawrence's power. The princess thought that humanity had only been safe from the demon lord, who was rumored to be the strongest, because of old sacred barrier left by the ancient hero. But this barrier was getting weaker every year. The demon lord had to be defeated before the magic disappeared completely. The situation was serious. Just then, Prince Edward asked permission to speak. The king told him to go ahead. The prince suggested they ask help from Act Enge. The king and the others were confused. Edward explained that it was Act who had discovered Lawrence's ability, who was once an orphan and had trained him. He was sure Act would find people who could fight alongside with Lawrence. Still, the king sounded hesitant to agree. Alistella then asked her brother who he was talking about. The aide answered that Act was the worst, most corrupted guildmaster, about 25 years old. He had started the Adventurers Guild called Heaven's Gem at a young age and later turned it into the second-best S-class adventurer guild today. Alistella was surprised to hear that. She claimed that Act was amazing to build the best guild out there. However, how could he be the worst with those great achievements? The aide said he heard mean stories about Act. They said Act sent people who were no longer needed in the guild to other places. He also had influence over nobility and even other countries. Rumors claimed that guilds who crossed him disappeared overnight. The princess wondered if such a person could truly exist. The prince quietly sighed. He knew that some people simply did not want Act to be in the spotlight, a role they had prepared for their favorites. King Joseph thought for a while and decided to let his son Edward handle the matter. A minister was about to argue, but the king gave him a glare that made him stop talking. The prince told his father he would contact Act immediately. Alistella asked her father if she could go too. The king was surprised and asked why. The princess thought she may just be a princess, but that didn't mean that she could just sit and do nothing. She exclaimed this was related to the fate of their people, and she also had the responsibility to make sure that everything would get resolved. The king told her she could do whatever she wanted. Edward saw that she was being earnest as usual. Flustered, Alistella replied it wasn't like she didn't trust him. The prince agreed and suggested going together. The princess was happy to hear that. The king ended the meeting and told his children to do their utmost for the sake of their country. Meanwhile, in the back area of Heaven's Gem, inside Act's bedroom, Frederica entered to check on him. She was his personal maid. She greeted him in the morning and informed him that his breakfast had already been prepared. Act thanked her and sat at the table. When he noticed a small dessert beside the meal, he wondered what kind of cake it was. Frederica explained that the head chef's daughter, Lily, had baked it as a way to show thanks for the help she often received from him. Frederica also admitted that she had warned them not to use too much sugar, but they had ignored her. Act did not mind and decided to eat it anyway, since he felt their time and effort should not go to waste. Frederica watched him with interest and thought about how he always showed a kind heart. Act wondered who she was referring to, but she simply acted playful, which made him think that this behavior was another one of her habits. While he kept eating the cake, he stared at her and thought about how useful she could be in negotiations if she used her smile more often. To him, she was a natural beauty. Frederica was caught off guard by the sudden compliment and admitted that she only showed her smile to him. Act accepted her choice and let her do as she pleased, while the quiet morning continued around them. After breakfast, they went back to the guild. Act asked his maid what was his agenda for the day. She replied that he had to check documents, a meeting with the mayor, and many other items packed to the brim. The maid suggested giving himself some more breaks, but Act saw no point in delaying work when it was in front of him. When they entered the guild, everyone went silent for a while and loudly greeted Act. Frederica announced that Act had a busy day and asked people to schedule meetings and report any non-urgent matters to her. Act thought that everyone were so cheerful early in the morning. Suddenly, a girl pushed through the crowd, crying that she urgently needed to see the Guildmaster. She threw herself at Act. He was surprised and asked how Yoko was doing. The tearful girl tried to speak but could not. Everyone whispered around. They wondered why Yoko, the commoner genius who became a court magician after leaving, had come back. Frederica reminded him it was about time for his meeting, but Act told the maid to cancel his meeting, saying he would apologize to the mayor in person later. Frederica asked if he was sure about that. Wiping her tears, Act said Yoko was one of his subordinate after all. He took the girl's shoulders and led her to his room. The people watching were impressed by how cool their guildmaster was. In the office, he had Yoko sit and gave her tea. He asked if she had calmed down. The girl said she was fine and asked for his forgiveness. Frederica recalled how Yoko had been kicked out last month and joined the Royal Court of Magicians 2 months ago. Act confirmed this, adding that Yoko was once a healer but had a high aptitude for magic. The maid asked if working as a court magician was not to her liking. Yoko replied that she liked the job because it was her dream job. However, something bad had happened. She was put in the magical research department and faced unwanted attention from their section chief named Hagen. He used his status as a nobility. He threatened to fire her if she resisted his advances and touched her very often above and below. She spoke to her co-workers, but they told her to stop complaining and endure it. She put up with it because Act had recommended the job, and she did not want to cause him trouble. But she could not handle it anymore. She wanted to quit as a court magician and return to the guild. Act felt troubled and understood the problem. He remembered a time when Yoko brought him documents he asked for. He saw she looked sick and asked if she was unwell. She said she was fine. Even though her temperature was high, she assumed it was just an error. He wanted to tell her to go home, but he knew Yoko was very dedicated to her work and wouldn't leave it unless it kills her. And so, he told her he was sending her away to become a court magician. She was surprised and happy, saying it was a dream come true and she would do her best. Now Act looked at the sad Yoko and told her to lift her head. He apologized, saying he should have learned more about the palace's inner workings and that it was his mistake for introducing him to that place. Yoko disagreed, saying it was all Hagen's fault. Act apologized again but said he could not agree to her request to return. After all, her childhood dream was to become a court mage. The girl was surprised that he remembered. Act replied that a guildmaster never forgot his subordinates' dreams and goals. Frederica claimed her master never forgets anything once he heard it and called him amazing. She claimed hating on uselessness to this level was a talent on its town. Act asked if that was supposed to be a praise. Anyway, he promised to take care of the situation so Yoko would not have to give up her dream job. The girl looked nervous. Act told Frederica to set up a meeting with the court. Yoko worriedly asked what he was going to do. Act claimed he would just teach some bastard about what would happen if he laid his hand on a diamond he polished. He pulled a small magic communication device from his pocket and spoke to someone, apologizing for calling all of a sudden. The person excitedly greeted him. Act asked if they had some time today. They claimed they did. Later, Act and Yoko arrived at Lessig Palace at the office of the court magicians. There he met Hagen, the chief of magical research section. Hagen scoffed him off, complaining how a commoner like Act was taking away precious time from a noble like him. Act said it would not take long. He had heard that Hagen was doing indecent things with one of his former guild member. Hagen boldly denied it and asked for evidence. Yoko was angry, but Hagen simply said she could make up any story and without solid proof, it was only rumors. He asked if the young guildmaster understood that. Act said he did. Hagen then said that since Act understood, he should leave, and Yoko should stay because he needed to have a word with her on a one-on-one intimate conversation. Yoko's expression darkened. Frederica told the upset girl not to worry, saying her master would handle everything. At that moment, Act said he had proof. He used his magic eye. The whole room shone bright. Yoko was left confused seeing herself. A whole replay showed Hagen telling her she was late in providing research materials. When Yoko tried to defend herself, Hagen cut her off, saying the schedule had suddenly changed and it was not her fault. But he needed to punish her severely, even if it was just a formality. He added that since they were alone, she should not resist. Hagen told them it was enough. Looking at the projected replay of the past, he asked Act if this was his power, a magic eye. Act confirmed that his right eye could see the past hidden in an environment. Hagen realized that if this was shown as evidence, his position would be lost. Act stood up and told Frederica he needed something. Hagen then exclaimed the evidence would be erased if he killed Act. He used his wind magic, Wind Edge, saying that if Act died, there wouldn't be anything to be worried about. Frederica calmly gave Act a knife and cut off Hagen's magic with one swing. Seeing how his magic attack was dispersed, Hagen was shocked. Act called out to Frederica, who then leaped toward Hagen and pinned his face to the table. She looked like she was about to kill him for trying to kill her master. Act told her not to waste her energy on him. Hagen was confused, saying it was impossible that someone would be able to see through his chantless magic. Act told him that his eyes saw everything. His right eye could see the hidden past, and surprisingly, his left eye could read the future and hidden potential. Hagen, twisted by the maid, was surprised. He realized Act had chronosight, the magic eye that lets someone see the past, present, and future. He thought that no one with such a rare power had appeared in centuries. He wondered how a commoner could have such a rare ability. Act turned to him and said he was not a complete evil and was willing to make a deal. If Hagen apologized to Yoko honestly and promised not to do it again, Act would pretend there was no proof. Hagen asked if that was true. Act assured him. Hagen quickly agreed to apologize. Hagen crawled to Yoko's feet, bowed, and begged for her forgiveness. He said his behavior was out of impulse. Act asked if he was admitting to all of his wrongdoings. Hagen exclaimed it was all his fault and promised not to do it again. Act asked if that was enough. Yoko hesitantly agreed. However, Act told her not to worry because it was not over yet. He then called out Edward's name. Everyone was shocked by the prince's sudden appearance except for Frederica, who simply bowed her head. Yoko was wide-eyed with surprise and Hagen was scared. Hagen tried to ask why he came, but Edward approached Act first, bowed, and said it had been a long time. Hagen could not believe that the prince was bowing to a commoner. Act and the prince greeted each other. Act asked Edward if he had heard everything. Edward confirmed it. He looked at Hagen and said with disapproval that the chief had brought shame on himself as a nobleman serving at the palace. Hagen tried to say it was wrong and a misunderstanding. The prince angrily cut him off, saying they had proof, and Hagen himself confessed, so he should prepare for punishment. Hagen, almost crying, begged him not to. He said he was merely touching a commoner. Edward, with angry eyes, said that nobles and commoners were equal. They were all citizens of the same country and could not be treated differently. If he didn't understand that, then he was not qualified to be a nobleman. Hagen tried one last time to persuade the prince to change his mind, but it was too late. A few days later, Yoko visited Act, apologizing for taking his time. Act assured her it was fine and asked for her progressive report. Yoko said Hagen was fired and lost his title as nobility. There were other charges, including assault. The new chief was a good person and she enjoyed her job now. Act said he was happy for her. Yoko thanked him sincerely for his help. She also said she knew he was a good leader, but it turned out he could fight too, which was amazing. She was curious about his chronosight. As a member of the magical research department, she would love to study them. Frederica tried warning her, but Yoko immediately said she was joking. Act calmly told Yoko that the eyes were not that useful and had limits. He explained that the further away the event was, the less clear the future he saw became. Sometimes the future was different from what he saw. Also, the skill used a lot of magic power, so he had to be careful not to use it too often. Frederica agreed, saying that Act had intelligence and eyes that allowed him to predict things, but he was not omnipotent like God, so Yoko should not have unrealistic ideas. Yoko said she understood everything and would definitely help them if they had any problems. Frederica, speaking in a way that sounded like a wife, replied that they would be happy to work with her. Act was annoyed by how they just finished the conversation by themselves. Yoko thanked him again and promised to help them in the future. After she left, the maid praised Act's work. She said he solved the problem and also made a strong link with the most likely person to become the next head of the court mages. She expected as much from an exemplary corrupt guildmaster. Still, Act still didn't understand why he was being thanked by others when he was only doing what was obvious. The maid smiled faintly. Act looked out the window. The maid concluded that he really was a corrupt guildmaster. Later, after resolving Yoko's issues, Act met with Prince Edward and apologized for making him put through it. Edward said Act did not need to thank them, as the royal family should have stopped such internal issuist. Edward then asked Act for a favor, to nominate people for Hero's Party. Act asked if he should find companions for Lawrence. Edward was surprised and tried to ask how he knew, but realized it was useless asking. Act said he didn't even look into the future if that was what Edward was thinking. He normally don't use his eyes for things like that. He knew his powers would get advantaged of, so he was the one chooses when to use it. He told Edward that finding suitable people wouldn't be an easy task. Edward hoped he could borrow his eyes and connections. Act wondered if the uptight ministers would allow it. Edward admitted they would not, since they only knew him by rumors. Act knew the ministers didn't want to leave things to someone they couldn't influence. To them, Act was a stray dog that they wasn't on the leash of any of the minsters, and if someone like that succeeds, they couldn't benefit from it. He knew too well that they don't want some random commoner youngster to take credit. Act said the whole situation was complete rubbish. He had his own goals and refused to waste time on entertaining the old fart's charades. Edward understood Act's anger but said Act was the only person who could do the job honestly without being tied to any single faction. Edward begged Act to help their country. He even bowed his head to show his sincerity. After a brief pause, Act refused. The prince was shocked and asked why. Act stated he did not care about the country's future. Just then, Princess Alistella rushed in, demanding to know why he would say that, and why he was refusing a royal decree. Edward spoke her name in surprise. Act calmly repeated that the kingdom's fate was not his problem. He said it was Lawrence's duty to save the world and that he was no longer one of his people. He pointed out the hero should find his own companions. He questioned if the royal family was so weak that they had to rely on a commoner. The princess became very upset. She told her brother they should leave. Edward tried to stop her, but Act told Alistella to wait. She angrily asked what he wanted. Act told them it was late and they should stay for the night. She was surprised that he showed enough care, but she insisted she did not have to listen to his advice. Act shrugged and said they were free to do as they pleased. She grabbed her brother and quickly pulled him out. Edward apologized to Act as they left and said they would see each other again. After they were gone, Frederica mentioned how rude the princess was. Act asked if she had heard everything. The maid confirmed she had and confessed she was this close to beating Princess to death. Act told her not to waste her time on it. Frederica tried to argue, but Act firmly told her not to make him say it again. Act's serious expression worried Frederica. He then turned to her and said he needed her to do something. Frederica realized Act must have seen something with his magic eye. Act thought that his eye sometimes saw the future on its own, and most if it were crises. He told the maid he needed to go out. Frederica asked if they really had the duty to help the royal family. Act told her not to get the wrong idea, explaining that this was just a step toward his own goals. Meanwhile, the prince and princess were riding home in a carriage. Alistella complained that Act was a terrible person. Edward told her not to be angry. He agreed that defeating the demon lord was the royal family's duty. The princess was upset that her brother seemed to be taking Act's side. Edward insisted Act was not rude, he just could not show his real feelings. Edward believed Act was a kind person. The princess disagreed. Edward thought the situation was bad. He believed both Act and his sister were necessary for the country's future. He explained that if Act easily accepted the royal decree, the minsters might start harassing him. Alistella still did not think Act should put his own future first. The prince then asked how they can compensate Act's losses. He explained that Act was the head of his guild and had a duty to protect his own people. Now, if he faced the big task of finding heroes, and if he failed, his guild would also suffer. The prince asked if she understood why Act refused. Alistella, feeling ashamed, agreed. The prince continued, saying Act was a good guy. The princess claimed to her, Act seemed selfish and corrupt just like the Rumours. Edward promised she would see the truth soon. Edward started to say more, but the carriage stopped suddenly. Alistella was thrown off the seat and Edward hit his head. Edward groaned and wondered what happened. Alistella asked what was wrong. A moment later, Edward felt a cold knife pointed at his neck. A bandit then discovered they were the prince and princess. Alistella realized they were robbers who knew their identity. Edward yelled at his sister to run and save herself. The bandit struck the prince, knocking him down. Edward tried to get up, but the bandit stepped on his hand and told him not to move. Edward asked who sent him. The bandit smiled and said it was a powerful person who found the prince very annoying. Edward wondered if it was related to the hero team selection. He shouted at the bandit to leave his sister alone since she was unrelated. The bandit said he did not care and only wanted the money. Alistella yelled at the bandit to release her brother. However, the bandit easily caught her arm and leaned closer to check her face. He was surprised how bold she was, and it would be fun to play with her. Edward rushed at the bandit, shouting at him not to touch his sister. Edward managed to strike him and yelled for his sister to run. They jumped out and saw several bandits surrounding them. They asked the first bandit what was happening. The bandit, rubbing a bruise, complained how it hurt. Edward pulled out his sword, but someone grazed his cheek and the prince fell. Alistella knelt by her brother and tried to wake him up. The bandits said it was a fast-acting poison and Edward would soon die. Alistella was terrified. The bandit explained they had planned to kill Act 2, but the prince and princess had come right to them late at night. Alistella feared for her brother's life and blamed herself for ignoring Act's advice. She apologized to Edward, who lay still. Then the bandit grabbed her hands and said it was time to have fun with them. The princess struggled and screamed for him to stop. The bandit threw her to the ground and pinned her down. The princess struggled and cried for help. The bandit told her no one would come. They were alone in the forest at night. He started ripping off her dress. The princess shrieked in horror. The badnitz was glad to hear her beautiful voice and asked how else she could scream. The girl closed her eyes, feeling helpless. At that moment, Act's voice called out, asking if the princess was giving up. The bandit was surprised and asked who Act was. He released the princess and turned to Act. Act told the bandits he was giving them a chance to leave. The bandit smugly said Act was foolish to walk to them just like that, making their job easy. Act looked at Alistella and told her this was what she got for ignoring his advice, and now she would face the consequences. The bandit felt offended that he was being ignored and rushed at Act. The princess shouted for Act to run. The bandit struck but missed. Act dodged the attack by barely moving. The bandit was shocked Act managed to dodge in this darkness. Act quickly moved behind the bandit and knocked him out. All the bandits stared in surprise. The bandit was confused and asked how Act did that. Act walked to Alistella and gave her his cloak to cover herself. She took it and asked about her poisoned brother. Act told her to relax. He had stopped the poison from working. She was confused. Act explained that he had the power to control time. He could speed up or stop the flow of time in an area. By stopping the time flow in the prince's body, he stopped the poison. Now he just needed to make him drink an antidote later. Alistella thanked God. Act turned to the bandits and pointed out how they have all failed their mission. He suggested them not to resist and surrender for their own good. The bandits laughed, saying they haven't failed yet since they can always call for reinforcements. Act then tossed a projection ball to the ground and asked if they were talking about those people. A scene was then projected in the area, showing a huge wolf obliterating the other bandits. The bandits were confused after seeing their comrades turn to popsicles. Act said he was happy to get rid of the criminals hiding in the capital. They took the bait so quickly and saved him a lot of time and trouble. The bandits were angry and asked if he just realized that he had done. Act said he did not owe them an explanation. A bandit ordered the remaining bandits to attack Act and kill him. The bandits ran toward Act. Act used his incredible speed to quickly defeat them one by one. He thought that by speeding up his own time flow he could move faster than a person could see. A bandit was angry and confused, wondering how they can fight against something like this. The bandits were being knocked out before they knew it. Soon all the bad guys were defeated. Alistella was amazed by what she had seen. A carriage appeared nearby. Act told the princess not to worry since they were allies. The carriage approached, and the princess realized it held the royal court healers. She assumed Act had known her brother would be poisoned. She wondered who Act really was. Noticing how she was wearing his coat, she couldn't help but blush. Watching her brother getting healed made her sleepy. She slowly leaned toward the ground, but Act helped her out. He couldn't help but sigh. Meanwhile, a minister was angrily yelling after hearing that the assassination attempt had failed. He was angry that the assassins known as the Guild Grey Wolf had lost. He tried to call the assassin guild's leader but could not reach him. Then Frederica entered his office. She held a severed hand with the assassin guild's mark on it, which was holding a ringing device. The minister was shocked. He fearfully asked who she was. Frederica bowed and greeted Minister Bourne. She said Act had sent her as his Grim Reaper. Just then, the minister's phone rang. The maid told him it was her master and that Bourne should answer it. The minister answered and heard Act say, "Checkmate. The assassin guild was destroyed." The minister cried that this was impossible. Act asked him if the maid had shown him the proof. Bourne looked at the hand and quickly offered to pay Act whatever he wanted. He suggested they team up, as they were both villains who wanted to make money. Suddenly, the minister felt cold. Frederica, who had caused the IT, said Act was not like a worthless scum such as him. She created a block of ice and trapped the minister. Afterward, she picked up the device and told Act she was finished. She praised Act for using the attack to get rid of small-time villains. Act told her to return right away. A while later, Alistella approached Act. He asked her what she wanted. The girl was confused and thanked him for saving them. The princess said she thought about it and decided she should apologize to him. Act told her that next time she should listen to other people's advice. Alistella was surprised that he spoke so genuinely. She realized this was the kind of person he was. She asked if he knew that the Assassin Guild was destroyed. She said her father had found the assassins tied up. She heard a minister had planned the attack and was now terrified of going public. She asked Act if he had planned all of this and why he helped them so much. Act told her not to misunderstand. It was a personal problem. He explained that if the royal children were attacked, it would also affect him since he was now connected to them. Alistella was confused. Act asked if Edward had not told her. He said he had been chosen to find the hero's team members and was supposed to help Edward as his advisor. The princess finally understood. Act must have planned to help from the start. This way, he would not be openly criticized. She asked him why he refused to help earlier. Suddenly, Frederica entered the room and pointed out how the princess doesn't understand a thing about her master. The maid pulled a stack of papers from a desk and said Act had planned to help Prince Edward from the very beginning. The princess was shocked. Frederica pointed to the papers. Alistella saw a list of candidates for the hero team. Act explained that they had been looking for suitable people long before the prince's request. The princess realized they had known Lawrence would become a hero. She thought about how convincing Act was when he refused them. It was amazing. The girl said they could have just told her the truth. The maid joked that Act was a person who hid his true feelings. The princess was confused. Frederica laughed and said she was the only one who truly understood Act. Act felt embarrassed and asked if the princess was done. He told her to leave. The girl said no. She wanted to stay with him for a while. Frederica was angry and asked why. The princess explained that she still did not completely trust Act and wanted to figure out if he was good or evil. Frederica called her selfish. Alistella said maybe, but she had a royal decree from her father, the king himself. She gave the document to Act. The maid snatched it and read it. The note said the princess should be accepted as Act's assistant in the guild until the hero team was finalized. Frederica saw the director of guild's seal on the paper. Act realized the princess came as an observer. Frederica then asked permission to sink the castle in a permafrost. Act told her to stop since it would be just a waste of time. Act read the note himself and agreed that from that day on, the princess would serve as his assistant. Frederica was angry and exclaimed she was already his assistant. Act told her that she would teach Alistella her new duties. Frederica looked defeated and walked out, trying to stay calm. She grabbed the door handle and shouted that the princess should not expect any special treatment from her. She slammed the door behind her and left. Act told the princess that even though her job was just for show, she still had to do her work correctly. Alistella said she understood. She swore to watch him closely to find out if he was truly an evil guildmaster. Act smiled and told her to do as she liked. The guildmaster's personal maid, Frederica, started her morning early. Hearing her alarm, she stretched and thought fondly of her master. She stood, got ready, put on her uniform, and went out to announce the morning meeting. Lily, the head chef's daughter, asked Frederica if the master had eaten her cake. The maid confirmed that he had, and that he found it delicious. The girl felt happy and promised to try even harder with her cooking. A dwarf then told Frederica that a visitor had been waiting near the gate since the night before. Lily complained about the man's persistence. Frederica decided she would handle the newcomer. At the gate, she saw the man and decided to get rid of him. The man exclaimed he was not a suspicious person, but Iranx, the guildmaster of the major guild, True Heroes. Frederica asked if he was really that Mr. Iranx. Iranx tried to ask if Act was doing well. She claimed her master was still sleeping and explained that he should have scheduled a meeting, as arriving so early was poor manners. The man apologized and said Act was very busy, making it hard to schedule a time. Frederica asked him his purpose for coming. The man explained that he wanted Act to return to his old guild. Years had passed since he had unfairly kicked Act out. The man had finally realized that his guild was falling apart, and that only Act's power had kept it running. The man was desperate for Act to return and help rebuild the failing organization. He fell to his knees and begged for Act's help. Frederica was angry. She firmly refused, asking how he could expel Act without cause and then selfishly demand his return. Iranx suggested forming an alliance between the guilds, but Frederica immediately shut down the idea, stating there was no benefit for Act's guild. The man threw himself at her feet and grabbed her arm, pleading that Act was a merciful man who helped the weak and should help them too. Feeling angered and disgusted, Frederica let out a strong magical pressure, telling him to cut it out already and calling him a maggot. She encased him in a block of ice and shouted that the master did help the weak for a greater purpose, but not for villains like him. The man shook from the cold, unable to speak. Taking pity, Frederica melted the ice and apologized for her sudden outburst. She told him he should try to rebuild his own guild. Iranx insisted it was impossible. Frederica reminded him that since he had once banished Act as useless, he must be strong enough to manage on his own. It was too early for him to rely on others. The maid then warned him that if he tried to approach Act through unofficial channels, she could not guarantee his survival. The man remained kneeling as she left. Frederica remembered her past as a magical creature. Act had offered her a place in his new guild, saying that keeping her power unused was a waste, and that she would be useful to the organization he was building. She promised herself she would protect Act's guild so it could achieve his goals. Later, in the Hoenn Desert, 3 adventurers ran into monsters. A female adventurer told her companions to form up to protect their caravan. The monsters were powerful and the group knew only a large army could help. A huge behemoth stood right in front of them. Escape was impossible and they could only watch the monster's attack fly toward them. Fortunately, someone appeared and told them it was too early to give up. He stood in front of the monster's breath attack and nullified it with a sword slash. The 3 adventurers were speechless. The man then swung his sword once more and defeated the huge monster. After that, he made sure the adventurers were fine. They were fine and they thanked him. The man replied that he only did what a hero should do. Seeing his great sword and golden mana, they realized it was Lawrence, the hero of the dawn. Lawrence scratched his head and claimed he wasn't someone that amazing. They asked him why he was all alone in the desert. The hero replied that his companions had just left because they could not keep up with him. He did not understand why though. The female adventurer looked at the defeated behemoth and realized it would be tough to be on the same team as someone who could kill it in one hit. She tried to encourage him. The hero replied that he would find teammates soon. The others can see how confident he was. Lawrence confirmed that the most trusted man in the kingdom was working finding members for the heroes' party as they speak. Sometime later, the dining room at Act's mansion was noisy. Act went downstairs and heard an argument between Frederica and Alistella. Frederica was confronting the princess. She claimed that she and Act were already connected by a deep bond and there was no more room for the princess. Alistella asked if they were in love. Frederica quickly said yes. Act entered the dining room and said no. The princess told the maid she was lying. Frederica then asked Act to confirm he was her wife. Alistella and Act wished each other good morning. Frederica then apologized for forgetting Act's wake-up time. Act told her to ignore it. He said she was his only servant, but it was true that they had a special relationship. Frederica seemed happy, agreeing that he understood her. Act thought the house had become much noisier since the princess arrived. Hez, the head chef, brought Act his breakfast. Act thanked her. Hez whispered that it was great that Frederica had made a friend. Act was surprised. Frederica joked that a little girl like the princess did not understand how adults behaved. Alistella was upset and reminded her to show some respect since she was a princess. The maid said her respect was only for Act. The princess was annoyed and called her rude. Act wondered if this counted as being friendly. Hez can see that they were practically best friends already. Act thought this was the first time Frederica didn't come on time to wake him up and assumed the two girls were a good match. Hayes suggested Act should learn to understand girls. Act grumbled that he did not need that. After breakfast, Act said they had to go to work. Alistella thanked him for a hair clip she was wearing. Frederica was angry seeing him give another girl a gift. Act explained that the hair clip was a magic item that would change one's appearance. He claimed it wouldn't be good if people found out that the princess was staying with them. Frederica got his point, but she claimed a hairpin would make the princess misunderstand. Alistella claimed she wouldn't, but her blushing face said otherwise. Act told them to keep moving. Frederica asked for a gift too. Act replied that she shouldn't need any magic tools like that. When they entered the guild, the members greeted their Act. They asked who the cute girl with him was. Act introduced the princess as their new member named Alice. Everyone cheered, assuming she was Act's new apprentice. Female members then crowded around Act, asking if he was going to dinner with them on their next day off. A small argument started among them. Ignoring the girls, Act told the maid and the princess to follow him. Alistella was surprised and asked if the guild really had days off. He told her they had 2 days off each week to keep up good performance. The princess worried that some members would get troubled if the guild was closed. The guild had a 5-day work week and 2 days off. He also explained that for the first 6 months, the guild provided living costs and a place to stay in fully equipped dorms. Strictly overnight quests were prohibited. Frederica added that the guild was generous to newcomers, and the master's mansion was right behind the guild, so he could respond to emergencies right away. Act said there was no need for the princess to learn that. Frederica exclaimed they should use the princess to spread word about how kind and thoughtful he was to his guild members. The princess was confused about being used, but she still agreed with Frederica that there were no other guilds like Act's, which were thoughtful toward their member. However, she felt like all of these were just ruse to fool her. Act claimed that would be a waste of time for him. He then told them that the conversation was over and everyone needed to get to work. Frederica shared that Act was the type to wear an annoyed face but was actually a very kind person. The princess looked at the maid in surprise. Frederica asked if anything was wrong. Alistella replied that everything was fine and they needed to go too. Frederica agreed and claimed it was time for the little girl to learn some work. As they stayed Act's office, moments later someone knocked. A member named Gould came in and greeted Act. Act recalled Gould was on a gathering request this time and warned him not to make any mistakes. Then the rabbit girl from before came in to wish him good morning. Act reminded her to be well prepared with her bird monster subjugation request. Another female member said she would do her best. Act knew this one worked a lot lately and told her to take her planned day off. Another member entered and Act recalled he was off duty. The member explained he had only stopped by to say his greetings. After the visits, Alistella was surprised and wondered if a morning greeting was part of the guild's routine. Frederica explained that the members did it on their own because Act was popular. Act reminded Frederica that he wasn't her plaything. Frederica replied that if anything, she was his love slave. Act made it clear she was his maid. Alistella watched the two of them flirt, completely confused. Alistella then asked Act if he truly kept track of every member's schedule. Since he was the one giving out tasks, Act confirmed that he did and said he gave out jobs based on each person's skills. The princess was amazed, saying that seemed like an impossible job. Frederica proudly called Act the best leader, but Act told her to be quiet. Alistella observed that for a high-ranking guild, Act's guild seemed to have few members. Act told her that many people eventually leave. She was surprised that people would leave such a good workplace. Act laughed and decided it was time to show her what kind of person he really was. A young boy named Kemis knocked and asked to enter. When Act agreed, he came in. Alistella was surprised to see a child working. Act then told the boy that he was fired and had to leave the guild immediately. Both Alistella and Chemist were shocked. Alistella hugged the child and angrily asked how he could fire a child so suddenly. Act explained that he was a child and too weak for the physical work of an adventurer. Alistella angrily asked why he even let the child in if that was his reason. Act replied that now he was not needed. Alistella was confused. Chemist accepted his dismissal, saying he knew he was not helpful and thanked Act for taking care of him until now. Alistella panicked, believing there must be something they could do. Act firmly repeated that Chemist had no future in the guild and called out to Frederica. The maid gave Chemist a set of papers about his next workplace. The boy looked at the documents in shock. Act explained that while he was weak, he had amazing talent as an alchemist. He told her the master of the alchemist guild in the capital was looking for a capable helper. Alistella was amazed to hear this, as that alchemist guild was known to be the best in the capital. Chemist was happy that he had such a good new job. Act told him to pack quickly and reminded him to ask for money to cover his moving costs before he leave. The boy's eyes were full of happiness. He promised to do his best, thanked Act deeply for everything, and apologized. Alistella was completely confused by what she had just seen. Act said that people leaving was a normal thing in any guild. Alistella agreed, but said giving them a better job and paying for their move was not normal. Act acted like he didn't care and said he was only doing what he needed to do to achieve his goals. Alistella asked if his goals were related to finding a team for the hero. Act confirmed this. The princess was confused about how creating a guild and forcing people to leave were part of a goal. Act told her their time was up and to call the next person. Another guild worker entered the office and quickly apologized. After some time, Act announced that the workday was over and they should go home. Frederica noted that Act had moved 5 people to new jobs that day. Act agreed it was a busy day. Seeing how he banished a lot of people, Alistella now realized why Act had terrible rumors about him. Act asked her if she finally understood the kind of person he was. Alistella answered that he was kind and caring. Act was confused by her answer. Frederica grabbed Alistella's hand and said the princess finally understood that Act only banished members for good reasons, and was better than other guildmasters. Act then smack-you'd her head and told her it was time to leave. When they left the office, they saw tables set up and guild members sitting together. They were inviting their friends to eat dinner and have a drink. Alistella asked Frederica if the members always waited to eat dinner until the end of the day. The maid replied that they did. Alistella was amazed and mentioned how popular Act was. Frederica proudly agreed, calling him the best guildmaster. When they arrived home, Act sat down at a table to look at documents. Frederica brought him something warm to drink. Act noted that he had not asked for it. The maid replied that a good assistant knows what the master wants before being asked. Act told her to leave it. Frederica noticed the papers and asked why he was working late when he told everyone else not to. Act explained it was a task from the king to find teammates for Lawrence. Frederica read a news report that Lawrence had just killed in Behemoth with 1 hit. She wondered if Act had any possible teammates in mind, though she knew he would succeed. Act said he would not quit the job he started. Frederica believed him and asked if anyone could match the hero. Act said he had a couple of people in mind, but one had problems with his personality. Frederica realized he was talking about that specific spearman. She said everything would be fine. Act asked her why she thought that. The maid replied that Act saw more than other people did, and when his eyes glowed, success was certain. Act felt embarrassed and told her to stop talking as if she knew everything. She hugged him from behind, asking him not to push himself too hard and take care of his own body too. Act said he was about to go to bed anyway and stood up. Seeing how disappointed his maid was, he asked her to massage his shoulders a little. Frederica was happy to agree. She suggested he lie down so she could massage his back, but Act refused. Later, far from the guild, a group of adventurers were hunting monsters in the Tamas Plains. A lookout shouted that he had found a pack of orcs. When asked how many, he shouted that there were 100. The adventurers were shocked because their task was only for 50 orcs. They realized something was wrong and needed to run away. Just then, a young man with a spear appeared. He called the orcs weak and bravely attacked the monsters by himself. He finished the fight very quickly. The group was stunned that he had easily killed a huge group of orcs. The spearman walked up to them and said that plebeians like them should be thankful that he, Ulger the genius, had saved them with his spear attacks. Meanwhile, Lawrence came to visit Act. Act and Lawrence greeted each other, saying they had not seen each other in a while. Lawrence said he was well. He saw Alistella, greeted her, and introduced himself. Alistella was surprised to meet the hero. She introduced herself as Act's assistant. Alistella knew Lawrence was a hero who fought evil. Lawrence humbly said he was not someone strong in front of Act, though. Act told Lawrence to take a seat. Lawrence looked for Frederica. Act explained that his maid was working on something else. Alistella would help instead. Lawrence started at the two for a while and realized they finally had another person who understood Act. He asked her to take care of him. Act asked what has gotten into him. Lawrence apologized and asked why he called him over. Act claimed he took on the request to find members for the hero's party. Lawrence said he felt safe knowing Act was working on the problem and was waiting for the person Act chose to arrive. Act told him to wait a little longer. Soon after, Ulger the spearman arrived. He had cleared time in his schedule for Act's sudden call. He noticed Lawrence, the hero, sitting there. Lawrence greeted him. Ulger introduced himself as the best spearman alive. Alistella quietly thought Ulger acted too proud. Ulger asked why the meeting was happening. Act pointed at Lawrence and explained that the hero needed strong team members. Ulger felt honored and said he was the perfect person for the job. Lawrence agreed and thanked him, saying he had been waiting for someone like him. Act stopped Ulger and said he was not a good match for Lawrence. He warned Ulger that if he kept acting like a fool, Act would change his mind. Ulger was surprised and demanded Act explain his words. Act said he had reasons for his decision and was sure of it because he knew Ulger very well. Ulger then decided he would leave the Gicht. He told Act that if Act stopped getting in the way, he would reach his full potential. He said he would become Lawrence's companion, achieve success, and silence Act's interfering guild. Act agreed to let him do as he wished. Alistella was confused by Act's decision. Ulger laughed, saying this would make him even more famous. He told Act to watch and be proud that he was a member of Act's guild. Act simply agreed. Ulger quickly took Lawrence and asked Act if there was anything else. Act told Ulger he was quitting the guild on his own will. He warned Ulger that if things became hard and he wanted to come back, it would be too late. Ulger scoffed and said he would return as someone who had defeated the Demon Lord. He told Act not to wait for him. Act accepted his words. Lawrence simply glanced toward Act and nodded their heads to each other with knowing smiles. After the two men left, Alistella thought Ulger was annoying and rude. She asked Act why he let Ulger go after all he had done for him. Act told her to calm down and not waste time for him. She then asked if Ulger was really the one he had thought to become the hero's companion, and asked why Noit outright said it to him. She claimed he was kind of roundabout with his explanation. 2 weeks later, Lawrence used a communication device to tell Act that something bad had happened. Act asked what was wrong, and Lawrence replied that Ulger had disappeared. Alistella looked at Act with worry and shouted in confusion. Meanwhile, in a bar in the city of Noetz, Ulger slammed a beer mug on the table and complained about a lot of things after becoming the hero's companion. He thought about how hard the training had been every day. Lawrence had just told him to run 100 kilometers and swing his spear 10,000 times. Ulger had decided to quit, claiming he was done with it all. He realized Act's warning was real. The place had actually been good, but he felt he could not go back. He wondered what he should do. Just then, he asked someone who they were. A man named Fyodor greeted Ulgar. Fyodor explained he was a scout looking for skilled people for a guild. He claimed Ulgar was the greatest spearman in the world. Ulgar proudly agreed. Fyodor mentioned that Ulgar had defeated many orcs by himself and deserved the title of the greatest. Ulgar laughed, agreeing that Fyodor understood skill and that his guild needed a strong man like him. Fyodor suggested Ulgar should become a combat instructor for their guild. Ulgar was surprised. Fyodor explained that a person with martial arts skills would be very helpful. He suggested this was a better job than fighting bad guys. Ulgar realized this might be true. Fyodor noted that the hero was the one who had to defeat the Demon King. He made Ulgar consider if he would be important if he only helped the hero. Ulgar agreed that Lawrence was too powerful, like a big fish in a small pond. Fyodor touched Ulgar's shoulder and said that the role of an instructor was a better fit, and that a trainer's life was easy and paid well. Ulgar said he understood. Then, Act's voice called out, asking for Ulgar. Fyodor tried to compose himself. Ulgar was shocked to see his ex-guildmaster. Act noticed Fyodor and remembered him as a deputy guildmaster from another guild. Act said he had business with Ulgar. Ulgar held his head and asked what Act wanted. Act commented on how he looked terrible. He heard him ran away. Ulgar was angry and denied running away. Act knew that Lawrence's training was too hard and it was too much for a small fry like Ulgar. Ulgar angrily asked if Act just called him a small fry. Act confirmed it. Act said Ulgar ran away with his tail between his legs because he was no match to Lawrence. Ulgar angrily said he was not a small fry at all. Act replied he was too weak. Angered, Ulgar exclaimed he would prove it by fighting him. If he won, Act would take back his words. Act laughed and agreed, but only if Ulgar would admit he was weak if Act won. Ulgar claimed he could not lose. Act turned to leave and told Ulgar to follow him. Ulgar thought Act was lazy and weak and that he would easily win. Fyodor, watching them leave, realized Act really knew his stuff. He felt that Ulgar had gotten his motivation back just right after his breaking point. He realized this was Act Enge's true skills as a guildmaster. When they reached the guild's training area, Lawrence and Alistella hurried into the arena, looking happy. Alistella called out to Act. Lawrence was glad Ulgar came back. Ulgar said he had not returned and was only there to beat Act. Act told him they would fight right away. Alistella was shocked and tried to stop them. Lawrence calmly placed his hand on her shoulder and said Act was strong. Alistella agreed but said Olger was not weak either. Lawrence agreed and shared how Olger was stronger than the average S-ranked adventurer, all thanks to Act's training. Alistella became more worried and asked them to stop the fight. Act announced that they were ready to begin the fight. Olger took a fighting stance, believing that the Act was not that strong at all. The spearman lunged with a quick strike, but Act simply turned away and avoided the blow. Olger was surprised that Act dodged. Act kicked Olger's foot and made him trip and fall flat to the ground. Alistella was amazed. Lawrence exclaimed that was the work of Act's chronosight. Act easily asked the spearman if that was all he got. Olger became angry and began attacking Act with new energy, but Act easily dodged and blocked all the hits. Act then found the right timing and delivered a punch to the guts. As the spearman fell on his knees, Act said that with Olger, the hero's team would surely be defeated. He also asked Olger even noticed that he had not moved even a single step. The princess was shocked. Act pointed out how a fighter like him couldn't even lay a hand on a non-combatant. Olger denied that he was weak and declared that he was the strongest spearman. With those words, he jumped up and suddenly got enveloped in bright light. This surprised Lawrence and Alistella. Olger was surprised to learn that he had this much mana the whole time. With his newfound strength, he was sure he would win this time. He charged toward Act with power and speed. However, Act simply dodged by leaping and claimed that was a good attack. Olger ended up getting punched to the face and was sent flying to the ground. Olger, lying on the floor, was confused and began to curse. Act said that this showed how weak Olger was. The spearman struggled to stand, angrily saying he would fight again. Act told him it was pointless. He said that even if Olger fought him 100 times, he would not win and would only make a fool of himself. Passing Lawrence, Act told the hero that he was putting the matter in his hands. Lawrence replied that he understood. The hero went to the spearman and praised him for the fight, especially the final attack. Lawrence said the hard work from his training was clearly visible. Olger was touched by the hero's concern. He shouted after Act that he would become stronger than he was now and would make Act admit it by beating him to a pulp. The next day, the princess excitedly asked Act if he had seen the newspaper. Lawrence and his team had defeated the demon army, and Olger had performed so well after taking down an enemy general. Act calmly drank his tea. Alistella asked if the training match had been arranged to motivate the spearman. Act replied that she was thinking too much. The princess said that he was very kind, but Act told her to stop talking nonsense. The girl quietly insisted that she liked that part of him. Frederica angrily asked what she just said. The princess slowly realized what she just said and started blushing. Covering her cheeks, she claimed she didn't mean it that way and left in a panic. Frederica realized she had a new rival and decided to not let her guard down next time. Seeing her ears came out, Act turned to his maid and told her not to show her ears and tail so much. The maid quietly agreed. Act noticed she looked pissed off and asked what was wrong. The maid claimed she was just thinking about how dense her master was. She then asked Act if he had seen Lawrence's report. She noted that Olger had completely changed and was training diligently. Frederica wrapped her arms around Act from behind. She explained that Act forced Olger to leave the guild to remove his safety net, and those harsh words were Act's way of being kind for Olger's growth. Act told her not to look for hidden meanings like others did. The maid insisted that even if no one else understood, she knew his awkward kindness. Though there was someone else now. Hugging him tighter, she promised that she alone would serve him until death, even if others hated him. Act tried to break free, but the girl seemed not to notice. He gave up and let her hold him. Frederica noted that Act did not tell her to leave. At that moment, Fyodor watched the scene of the maid embracing Act. Fyodor thought that because of Act, the number of Lawrence's teammates had grown. He decided that since it was only one person, he would not report it as it was within acceptable limits. However, he wondered about Frederica. He didn't expect her to be alive after he had thrown him into the depth of an abyss because she had been interfering with their plans. But he trusted his gut feeling for now and would only watch. Act knew someone was watching and glanced toward the window. Later that morning, in front of the guild, Frederica finished her tasks, and Act agreed the work was done. Act reached for the door and heard a noise from inside. Frederica listened and seemed surprised by the voice. When they walked in, they heard Roselia greet Act loudly. Roselia, the strongest frontliner of the guild, said she had not seen Act in a long time. Act asked Roselia how she was feeling. Roselia exclaimed she thought she was dying of loneliness. Act claimed people don't die from loneliness. Roselia exclaimed she just loved him so much that she might have. Frederica couldn't hold back any longer and angrily told Roselia to get off her master. Roselia acted like she was just seeing her. She then claimed she had a new member to introduce. Act asked if they were useful and Roselia confirmed they were. Act claimed it was the perfect timing since he also had something to tell her. He asked her to follow him. He also called for his maid. Frederica sweetly responded, but her expression turned deject as Act simply asked for tea. The maid followed his instructions with anger. Roselia could see that he never changed. When they entered the office, the girl wanted to know what business he had with her and why he had called her in. She hoped he wouldn't ask to join him in bed since she was still sweaty from her quest. Act gave a sharp reply that showed he had no such plans. Rosalia acted disappointed and behaved as if she would have offered herself to him if he had ever asked. She also hinted that he could come to her any time if he ever changed his mind. Act stayed firm and made it clear he would never sleep with his subordinates. Rosalia then joked about transferring to another guild. He told her to stop playing around and focus on the real topic. He had called her to inform her that she was now banished from his guild. The girl gasped when she heard it. At that moment, a fiery vortex formed between them and a fairy appeared with anger in her eyes. She refused to stay silent. She exclaimed he had fooled her master and now he was even driving her out. She seemed completely outraged. Act was just as surprised as Rosalia when this unknown fairy showed up. Rosalia explained that this was Misery, the fairy who she saved during the fire dragon subjugation request. Misery had nowhere to stay afterwards, so Rosalia had taken her in. Act understood that part and then proceeded to talk about her banishment. Misery demanded that he face her and listen. She then fired a pillar of flame toward him. Her strike was strong enough to send him crashing into a bookcase. Rosalia shouted at her with anger, wondering what she was doing and why she had attacked. Misery exclaimed, said she would never accept that someone so weak could be Rosalia's guildmaster. Act then calmly admitted Misery had some impressive magic. He agreed to let her join the guild. Misery grew even more irritated, thinking he was full of arrogance and acting as if he wanted to gain something back. Rosalia told her that she had crossed the line and should go outside to cool her anger. Misery glared at Act with hatred, upset that she was being scolded because of him. She turned into a pillar of fire once more and disappeared from the office. Rosalia bowed politely to Act and apologized. He told her he didn't care. However, she had found a pretty someone useful. Rosalia agreed with him, adding that Misery was excellent as a support. That's why she brought her to the guild, but her personality, that's something else. Act assured her the guild doesn't hire people based on personality alone, and promised to prepare a guild card for the fairy. Frederica entered with tea and asked what they were talking about. Act replied it was about Rosalia's banishment. The maid easily agreed that was a great idea, one less rival for her. Sometime later, near the entrance to the Scylla labyrinth, Misery felt upset as she thought about Act. She found him annoying. Henri the thief reminded her not to speak like that since the guildmaster was someone she respected. Ride the magician agreed because their guildmaster seemed to know everything. Bridge the warrior supported that idea as well. Misery wondered why they all admired him so much. Henri explained that the guildmaster was a kind person, and the rest of the team agreed, but Misery still could not accept it. This group belonged to Rosalia's personal party. Misery then said they had almost been kicked out of the guild. Rosalia explained she would not leave and that the guildmaster surprisingly allowed her to stay. She also hinted that there was more to the story. Suddenly, Misery noticed something ahead and told the team there was a secret passage. Rosalia said she did not see anything. The fairy claimed it was a wall made of illusion. Henri told them to wait because she needed to check for traps. Misery ignored her, rushed forward and dove inside. Rosalia grabbed her by the collar, pulled her out, and scolded her, asking if she wanted to get herself killed. The fairy said everything was fine. Rosalia reached her hand into the space and discovered that it was truly a hidden area. The team entered and Misery told her mistress to follow. Rosalia admitted that noticing the passage was impressive, but she also asked if Misery considered the danger. Moving into an unknown place could lead to anything. The fairy insisted that everything was safe and that there were no traps. She claimed she had already checked the area with her wind magic and found no teleportation traps. Still, Rosalia warned her that she was being careless. Misery suddenly urged everyone to look at the treasure inside. She insisted the discovery was all thanks to her. Henri glanced at Rosalia in warning. Rosalia agreed and told Misery to step back. The fairy didn't listen and said everything was fine and that they needed to divide the treasure soon. She reached toward the treasure, but the treasure began melting. Misery asked in surprise what was happening as a huge magic circle appeared beneath their feet. Rosalia explained it was a magical teleportation barrier. The fairy stared in disbelief, saying there should not have been any traps and that this situation should have been impossible. The magical aura spread across everyone in the room. When the trap finally turned off, Rosalia checked if her team was complete. She looked around with confusion as she tried to understand where they had ended up. Everyone noticed that they had been moved into a large chamber. At that moment, the torches on the walls lit up with bright flames, filling the place with light. Misery felt a wave of fear as she tried to make sense of the sudden change. Rosalia warned the team to prepare for a fight because something dangerous was approaching. The fairy looked unsure, and as she looked toward the front, she felt the chills all over her body. Rosalia explained that this chamber served as the room of the dungeon boss, who ruled over the entire maze. A huge monster appeared before them. The fairy started panicking. Rosalia urged her to stay calm and instructed the team to stick to their training. The group slowly moved forward. Far away, Fyodor watched them through a magic ball and felt pleased that his plan was going well. Thanks to a dumb fairy, things had become easier for him. He claimed Rosalia had the potential of becoming one of the hero's companions, an obstacle to their plan, and so he decided to have her removed from the face of Earth. After some time, Misery appeared in the guild, filled with despair. She begged everyone to help her mistress because she believed Rosalia would die if nothing was done. Act heard her cry and asked for an explanation. She exclaimed she triggered a teleportation trap and had the whole team sent to the dungeon boss's room. The adventurers discussed the situation since defeating the boss monster usually required around 30 people. They wondered if escape was possible. Act came down the stairs and explained that no one could leave the dungeon boss's room until the It was defeated. The others then questioned why Misery was able to leave. Act explained that the fairy had used maldistribution magic, which allowed her to form bodies of wind with their own awareness that could appear in different places at the same time. When asked if her real body was still inside the labyrinth, she confirmed it. She felt embarrassed yet impressed that the Guildmaster understood her magic so well. She also explained that there was still no way out for her real self, which made her panic because Rosalia was in danger. Even though she felt selfish for asking, she begged everyone to save her mistress. After a quiet moment, the adventurers agreed. They believed that helping anyone from the guild when they were in trouble was what made them a part of Heaven's Gem. However, Act objected, pointing out that even Rosalia, the strongest in the guild, had been unable to defeat this enemy. He doubted they could succeed. Misery, shocked and desperate, angrily asked if they were just abandoning her master. Act called out to Frederica and the maid appeared at once to report that everything was ready. He turned to Misery and told her they needed to leave. The adventurers reacted with excitement because they felt safe now. It seemed their master already had a plan, and Frederica was strong enough to support it. Misery wondered if the master would truly help after everything she had said earlier, but Act reminded her that she was mistaken if she thought he was doing it for her. He was the one who sent out Rosalia on the quest, and all responsibility rested on him. It was also far too early to lose someone like her. Misery felt grateful, but she still believed nothing would change if he handled it alone. Frederica smiled and hinted that Misery would understand in time. Their master was not only kind but also carried other strengths. They rushed toward the Scylla labyrinth with Act leading the group. The fairy pointed out that moving so fast could be risky because of hidden traps. The maid answered with confidence that there was no problem. Their guildmaster avoided every trap and every enemy without slowing down. Misery watched in growing surprise as she realized they had not faced a single danger on the path. She wondered what kind of ability could allow this. She doesn't know what was going on anymore. Before long, they finally arrived in front of a huge and menacing door. Misery was surprised to arrive so quickly without taking any shortcuts. Act calmly told her they were going in. Inside the room, Rosalia kept fighting the monster with all her strength. She thought that its tentacles, no matter how strange they looked, were extremely hard. The demon seemed to mock her as it pushed its attacks even harder. She used triple slash and cut several tentacles, and for a moment she believed her attacks were working. She followed with triple thrust blooming, stabbing multiple tentacles at the same time. She then used one of the severed tentacles as a foothold to finish off the main body. However, she noticed the tentacles growing back. They regenerated too fast and her strategy failed. The enemy's endless recovery confused her, and she began losing control of the fight after only a few exchanges. She wondered if doubling her speed would have been enough to win, but she was running out of options and couldn't do it on her own. At that moment, she felt someone caught her. Act had arrived just in time, and his sudden appearance shocked her. He then looked toward Frederica, and the maid told him to take care of the wounded while she handled the monster. She shifted into the form of a magical beast and charged fiercely at the master of the labyrinth, acting as the new threat the demon had to face. The demon looked confused by her sudden appearance. Rosalia felt a mix of surprise and disbelief, unsure if Act had come for her sake. Act corrected the thought by saying he was there only because he had been asked to come. Misery happily rushed into her mistress's arms. Act asked about the rest of the team, and the fairy pointed toward their location. Her true body held the barrier, and she instructed him to follow her. Act saw the wounded people and stared at the wounds with his left eye. Ride looked at his injured leg with surprise because the pain was already gone. Henri seemed amazed as she watched. Misery wondered if the healing stopped both the bleeding and the pain. He explained that he used time manipulation. By slowing the body's internal time, the injuries stopped getting worse. Act studied Misery's double and thought about how the wind created a protective barrier too. He gently patted the fairy's head, thinking that she had helped and protected them well, and that she could leave the rest to him. Misery grew emotional at the compliment. Rosalia's team wanted to join the fight, but Act refused. He believed they would only risk their lives for nothing and cause even more problems. He decided that he, Roselia, and Frederica would defeat the enemy. He then looked at the fairy and ordered her to protect the others. Roselia pointed out that the tentacles were the biggest problem because there were far too many of them. He noticed the monster's super regeneration, which normally needed many people to counter. Roselia seemed confused because there were only 3 of them, but he believed 3 were enough. He looked at his comrades and signaled that it was time to finish the demon. The girls quickly followed his lead. Frederica stayed in her transformed state and released a loud roar. Ice blocks erupted from the ground and trapped the boss monster. Roselia reacted with excitement as she watched all the tentacles freeze. Act and Roselia then tried to sneak past the monster, but then Misery shouted as more tentacles started growing from it. Roselia attacked the creature's limbs again. On the other hand, Act just continued running forward. Confused, the fairy asked what he was even doing. Roselia then dashed forward and protected her Guildmaster from more tentacles. She told the fairy that they already won. Act jumped upward, grabbed the monster's hair, and held on while staring into its eyes. He claimed the creature had harmed his people, which was a serious crime that deserved death. He activated his evil eye and glared at the monster. The boss monster just stood there frozen as a burst of magical power surged from Act's eye. The monster fell backward, and its eyes soon became lifeless. Misery stared in shock, amazed by how Act took down the dungeon boss in one shot. She asked where the light was. She just realized why Act was her mistress and the Heaven's Gems Guildmaster. Act closed his eyes and began to fall helplessly from the height. Frederica caught him on her back before he hit the ground. Act praised their effort as his injured eyes swelled shut. Frederica believed he had done well and gently placed him on the floor before returning to her human form. Roselia looked at the monster pinned to the wall and asked what he had done to it. He explained that it was a technique that stopped the inside of anyone who met its gaze, leaving them unable to move. She wondered if staring at an enemy could defeat them instantly. Misery was startled, but Act told her not to worry and that they should head back. Without warning, Act staggered. Frederica and Roselia held his arms and turned to him with worry. He only swayed in response. Roselia looked at him with surprise, then laughed softly and said he truly was their irreplaceable Guildmaster. Later in the office, Misery bowed her head and regretted that her careless actions had placed her mistress and the others in danger. She believed she should leave because she had caused trouble for everyone. She thought she had burdened Act as well, since the last attack had clearly taken a toll on him. She stared at his bandaged eye with guilt and said she no longer had the right to stay in the guild after harming the leader. The fairy prepared to fly away, but Act stopped her. He said it was too soon for her to leave. She was new to the guild and new members often made mistakes. It was normal. Misery tried to protest, confused, since the problem was so large, but he continued. He reminded her that her support role inside the dungeon had been excellent. He handed her something. Confused, the fairy asked what it was. He claimed it was her guild card and announced that he approved of her as a new member of Heaven's Gem. The fairy stared at him in disbelief and tried to speak, but he continued. He said she had accepted her mistakes and asked for help when she needed it. She had given her best effort, even inside the dungeon. He had no intention of letting go of someone who could stay calm and work with clear focus while setting aside personal pride. He also said she should continue supporting Roselia and the others. The fairy suddenly cried and thanked him with all her heart. She promised she would give her very best from then on. Roselia watched her assistant with a warm smile. Act then spoke with Roselia and said she would be suspended for a while as punishment for placing the group in danger. Roselia asked if he was sure about that. Misery was confused, believing everything had been her fault and not Roselia's. Act said the responsibility for the group's actions had always belonged to the leader. The fairy tried to protest, but Act explained that the guild had a retreat on the beachfront resort. Roselia needed to take the party members there for half a month. Everyone would rest and enjoy quiet time away from work. Misery tried to protest, but then realized she just heard him said resort. 2 weeks in a villa at the shelter sounded unbelievable. Roselia felt just as confused as her. Act continued and said that during this time they could do whatever they wanted. They could relax by the beach and enjoy themselves. He would give them enough money so they could live without worry. Roselia laughed softly and Act wondered why she was suddenly laughing. Roselia simply replied that they would enjoy a proper rest. Frederica claimed this was basically a trip for welcoming a new member, fully paid by the employer. She couldn't believe he still called himself as a corrupt guildmaster when she just gave the team a paid leave to hang out. Soon, Roselia's group enjoyed their vacation fully. While resting under the warm sun on the beach, Misery asked Roselia why the guildmaster had tried to expel her from the guild before. Roselia said they had planned to send her away to the hero Lawrence's party. Misery reacted with amazement and asked why she refused such a chance. Roselia said it was because she did not want to leave Act. The fairy was surprised that this was the only reason. Roselia said it was normal to stay close to the person one loved. She said Act always thought about the future of his subordinates. When he needed to banish someone, he acted strict so they would not doubt him. But if one would really oppose like she did, he would take back his decision. Misery asked if the Guildmaster was really putting that much thoughts into his members. Roselia said that was why everyone loved him so much. Misery felt regret. She realized she had been unfair to him before. Roselia said the master forgave everything because he believed the mistakes of his subordinates were his responsibility as well. That was simply his way of thinking. Misery looked pleased to hear such things about Act and giggled while blushing. Roselia sighed and said he had gained another rival. The fairy reacted shyly, confused by her comment. Roselia laughed and said Misery was blushing, which looked cute. She guessed Misery had fallen for their Guildmaster too. Misery, fully embarrassed, tried to deny it. Meanwhile, Frederica sensed something. She exclaimed she just detected a sudden surge of romantic comedy energy. Act asked what kind of nonsense she meant. The maid urged him to set her as his number one. He said all subordinates were equal to him. The maid insisted that was not what she meant and complained that he was impossible to deal with. She sighed and said she would return to the real matter. She asked why he had come back. Act explained that Misery, a skilled fairy, couldn't detect the teleportation trap. This seemed strange, and he realized it had not been a trap at all. Frederica, surprised, asked what it could have been. Act assumed someone had used a teleportation spell on Roselia and the others. The maid said she understood, but teleportation magic was extremely hard to use, which meant the enemy was very strong. She asked if he had seen the attacker. Act said no because the person had not been near them. The spell had been cast from very far away. Frederica said it sounded impossible because only a few people could use teleportation, and using it beyond the known limits was beyond normal human skill. He asked her to stay calm and said only one thing was certain. Someone had tried to kill his people. Act clenched his fists so tightly that his fingers cut into his skin until blood appeared. The maid stepped closer, took his hand, and told him he had hurt himself and needed to calm down. Act, still filled with anger, said that some bold enemy had dared to target his subordinates. He planned to repay this debt sooner or later without fail. After some time, Act angrily asked the receptionist named Camilla what she was doing. Camilla answered with excitement because she thought she was causing trouble. He said he did not want to hear her excuses. She apologized, looking upset. Act then told her that from that moment on she did not have to come anymore. He told her to pack her things and leave right away. Alistella noticed that he had dismissed the woman. She asked what had happened to the woman and if she had done something wrong. Act explained that Camilla's son had developed a high fever. She had received the news earlier that morning from the grandmother who was taking care of the child. Camilla returned and thanked him. He told her to go home already. She might not return for a few days. He told her to only come back when the child was fully recovered. She said she understood and thanked him again. Alistella commented that he was very kind. Act said she should not misunderstand. He only wanted to make sure she would not bring any infection to work. After having lunch in his office, he told another member that he did not have to return anymore. The man seemed confused because he still wanted to work in the guild. Act told him to stay quiet since it was the Guildmaster's order and he needed to leave right away. The member accepted it and thanked him for everything he had done. After the man left, Alistella entered the room and wondered what had happened. Act explained that the member had asked for a few days off. She thought that was the reason he had removed him from the guild. Act had learned that the member's mother had collapsed at home, so he arranged a place for him at a merchant guild near his house. The work there was lighter and the hours were shorter than those of an adventurer. This made it easier for him to care for his mother. It was a reasonable choice, yet the member still wanted to stay in the guild. His mother was getting older, and no one knew when her health might fail. Act wondered why the man did not see that a job closer to home was better for him. A sudden shout came from the window. The same member stood outside and thanked the Act again, saying he would be grateful for the rest of his life and would return once his mother recovered. Act found the whole situation confusing. He wondered what the former member was talking about when he just got banished. Alistella smiled because she believed he truly cared about the people working for him and thought it showed his generous nature. Later that evening, a girl started throwing a tantrum in Act's office. She looked exhausted and said she could not handle the work anymore and wanted to quit. Act remained calm and refused to let her leave. She insisted the work was too difficult, but Act reminded her that it was too early to give up and that she was capable of handling it. Alistella called out to him and asked if she wanted to leave the guild. He answered that she did not. This girl had left the guild before and was now the guildmaster of a magic tool research guild. The princess reacted with surprise because Rita was very young and already leading a guild. Rita smiled and asked if she really looked that young. She introduced herself as Rita, the guildmaster of the magic tool research guild called Colorful Star. She shook the princess's hand and hoped they would get along. Alistella introduced herself in return as Alice and asked if Rita wanted to quit her job. Rita said yes and explained that she could not manage people. It was too hard, and she could not take it anymore. She wanted him to let her work under him again. Act told her no. She had been the guildmaster for 3 years already, and it was time for her to stay strong. Rita said she had been trying for those 3 years and had reached her limit. Act explained that since she took over the guild, its numbers had grown every year. Rita said that growth was only luck. Act replied that real success was not random. It showed that she had the skill to lead. He knew she had been working hard, and he believed she could handle even more. She had talent as both a magic tool researcher and a leader. He fully supported her. Rita blushed. She then agreed. If she quit now, she would only cause trouble for him, and she did not want that, so she decided to return to work. Act told her that if she had time to stand around and talk, she should use it to create something useful. Rita reacted at once and said that when she finished a new design, the first thing she would do was bring it to him. He said he would look forward to it because she always made great products. Rita felt touched because the Guildmaster had praised her. She went back to work. After Rita left, Act said it was impossible to understand any of them. They had already found a good place to work, yet everyone still wanted to return to him. Alistella looked at him and stayed quiet. He wondered what was wrong with her. The princess admitted that nothing was wrong and said she only thought he was a very strange person. The Act agreed and thought she was someone whose emotions changed almost every moment. When night arrived, Alistella drank wine in the guild hall and said it tasted amazing. She had never tasted wine like that before. Roselia explained with a smile that the alcohol and food were made by people whose talents the Guildmaster had once noticed and helped grow. Alistella was surprised because it meant there were many skilled people in the guild. Anfrey suddenly called out to her and said she was mistaken. Wright added that the truly outstanding person was the Guildmaster. Henri explained that when she had been thrown away as useless, Act had reached out to her, saw her hidden talent and helped her develop it. Without him, she believed she would have ended up dying on the streets. Alistella then asked if it was fair to think that everyone in the guild liked the Guildmaster. The whole room suddenly became tense. The air felt heavy. She wondered what was happening. Someone from another table asked if she was really asking whether they liked the Guildmaster. Alistella, confused, asked if they did not. She wondered if she was wrong even though everyone praised him so much. She had assumed he was a corrupt Guildmaster because of the rumors. Alistella learned that Roselia believed she had misunderstood everything. Roselia explained that they all cared deeply for the Guildmaster. One adventurer agreed and another girl added that the word like no longer felt strong enough because they all loved him with great passion. They began sharing stories and Alistella, surprised, realized her guesses had been correct. She understood that everyone saw Act as a kind and dependable man. They asked if she felt the same way about the Guildmaster, which made her feel very embarrassed. The adventurers then mentioned that he was reliable, smart, and handsome, which made it easy for anyone to fall for him. Alistella, still embarrassed, tried to explain that this was not what she had meant. Suddenly, Roselia hit the table and announced that the Guildmaster belonged to her. The adventurers immediately started arguing. Alistella tried to calm them, but she could not stop the growing noise in the room. Roselia then admitted that she wanted to give her first time to the Guildmaster because she loved him. The princess rushed over and urged her to settle down and drink some water. Suddenly, Act entered the hall with a serious look and asked why everyone was yelling in the middle of the night. The guild members became scared because they realized they had been making too much noise. Act agreed and said he could hear them all the way from his mansion behind the building. Their noise had woken him up, and it felt like they had dared to disturb his sleep. The adventurers became restless and started to apologize. Act then shut the door and ordered everyone to go home and get some rest. After hearing this, they quickly started packing. Alistella watched all of this and thought it was strange. They had just been scolded, yet they still looked cheerful. Roselia said it was because the Guildmaster cared about them. If they drank too much, they would not be able to work the next day, so he came to stop them from getting drunk. Alistella realized he was not angry about losing sleep. Roselia explained that he was not even wearing pajamas, which meant he had not been sleeping. He never got angry without a real reason, and even when he did, it was because he cared. Alistella understood that many guildmasters treated their members like tools and removed them without a second thought. Act was different. He saw people as true members of the guild and not as pieces to be moved around. She became sure that her first impression of him as kind had been correct. The princess had said he was a good man, and Roselia agreed, calling him genuine and the best guildmaster in the world. Alistella paused, and when she saw Roselia's smile, everything felt clear. Rumors should never be trusted. Another day comes. Act and the princess chose to play chess in his office. He noticed that Alistella had stopped moving and wondered why she seemed frozen, wanting her to continue the match. Alistella then began calling out her moves with excitement as she tried hard to win. At that moment, Frederica entered the room, gave Act the evening newspaper, and asked if they were playing chess. Act thanked her and mentioned that he wanted to relax for a bit, although his opponent had turned out to be too weak. Alistella reacted with displeasure because she had once been the best player in the royal court. Act simply encouraged her to continue her move. The maid then asked about the new member for the heroes party. The Act explained that he had already picked a close combat fighter he trusted to protect his back. What he needed next was a mage. The princess agreed and pointed out that finding someone like Lawrence would be extremely hard. Act told them to prepare because they were leaving soon. The princess reacted with surprise since she believed the chess game was not finished yet. Act quietly made one final move and ended the match with a checkmate. Frederica calmly announced his victory, which felt satisfying. Act then started to leave the office and said that Frederica would stay in charge. She lowered her head and wished them a safe trip. After some time, they set out. Alistella asked where they were going, and Act told her to check the newspaper headline. She read about an explosion inside a dungeon and the strange rescue of everyone who had been there. Act said they were heading to a town close to the scene because their hero's next companion should be in that place. The girl felt confused as she wondered how Act could know that. Act told her to continue reading. Alistella saw that the cause of the explosion was still unknown. She smiled and suggested that the blast was likely caused by a spell, which meant a mage was inside the dungeon who was strong enough to blow it up. Act said she was completely off the mark. Even if someone caused it on purpose, why destroy the dungeon along with themselves? If it was an attack, then why were there no deaths? She agreed that his point made sense. There were too few injuries for an attack of that scale. Act added that the explosion was most likely caused by a fire dragon. It was mating season for them, and they were extremely aggressive during that time. If someone survived a direct hit from its flames, then one of them had to be a mage strong enough to protect the rest. After a few days of traveling by carriage, they reached the city of Liverno. Act and Alistella went directly to the Adventurers Guild and started asking people about the incident. Guildmaster Gary explained that an entire floor of the dungeon was gone, and he believed no one would have survived. Act asked for the name of the person who first reported it. Gary said it was someone named Eli. He claimed Eli was a new adventurer who tried hard but had little success. People said his teammates bullied him and treated him like he was useless, and Gary had already warned them several times. Act asked again, making sure Eli was the one who ran to report it and if there was a way to find him. Gary said yes and told them that Eli's team was at the tavern. They thanked him and left. On the way to the tavern, Alistella asked if Eli was really a mage on the same level as Lawrence. Act believed he was. Alistella remembered how people called Eli useless and could not understand how someone like that could be a strong mage. Act felt that arguing without seeing the truth for themselves would only waste time, so they continued their search. After a while, they reached the tavern and went to a man sitting at a table. He was the leader of Eli's former group. Act asked to speak with him, and the man answered with a grin that Eli had been removed from the team. The princess asked why. The man explained that Eli had been useless and only caused problems. Even during the dungeon trip where the explosion happened, Eli kept telling them they needed to go home, and the group ended up in trouble because of him. Alistella felt upset after hearing this because it sounded unfair. Act thanked the man for the information and handed him a bag of money. The man called him generous and Act agreed, saying the payment saved him a lot of trouble. When the man asked what he meant, Act turned away and said that fools would never understand. He then told Alistella it was time for them to leave. Once they were outside, Alistella asked why he had stopped her earlier. Act said arguing with that man would only waste time. She followed beside him, still bothered. If not for Eli, a tragedy would have happened, and now the same person they owed their safety to had been kicked out and mocked. It felt wrong to her, and her thoughts were filled with frustration. Act told her that her anger would not change anything and would only drain her energy. She wanted to say more, but he looked at the sky and said the rain would start soon. Their search would continue the next day, and for now they needed to return to the inn. On their way back, rain began to fall, so they ran back toward the inn. Alistella reacted with surprise when the light rain turned into a heavy downpour. Act told her to keep close as they rushed through the street. While they ran, Act noticed a young man walking depressingly through the heavy rain. The boy moved with a quiet sadness that made Act stop at once. The princess looked at him with confusion, wondering why he suddenly stopped. Act told her to return to the hotel, then he ran toward the young man named Eli. Alistella felt confused and tried to understand what was happening as she watched Act chase after him. Act caught up to the young man and confirmed his name, then said he had been searching for him. He placed his cloak over Eli's soaked body and asked him to come along since they needed to talk. Eli felt unsure, but Act explained that he meant no harm. After thinking for a moment, Eli finally agreed to follow him. When they reached the hotel, the princess listened to Act's explanation. She quickly grabbed a towel and complained that he could have explained everything more clearly from the start. Act answered that it would have taken too long. Alistella began drying Eli's dripping hair while Act told her that the hotel had separate rooms for men and women, and Eli should take a hot shower first. Eli felt embarrassed and said there was no need for so much attention, but Act firmly reminded him that catching a cold would only cause more trouble. The princess quietly told Eli that sometimes kindness should simply be accepted. Eli stood at his room door for a moment, unsure if he should enter, until Act urged him to go inside and the princess gave him a gentle push. Act then stepped into his own room thinking he needed a shower as well. Act tried to tell the princess something but stopped himself. The two then went inside. Act didn't care anymore. Just when Act was planning to take his own back, the princess shouted. She barged into Act's room and then tripped on something. She then fell on the Guildmaster. He asked what she was doing and she admitted that she had just learned that Eli was actually a boy, which she found both surprising and unfortunate. She couldn't believe she just saw a man naked. Act then wondered if she noticed that she was wrapped only in a towel and was currently on top of him. He told her to put her clothes on. Only then did the princess realize her situation, and she felt a rush of deep embarrassment. A few minutes later, Act gave Eli a warm drink. The boy thanked him. The princess stayed on the bed and hid her embarrassed face under the sheets. Act asked how long she planned to stay like that. Alistella said it was his fault and told him to take responsibility. Eli then asked who they were. Act introduced himself as the Guildmaster of Heaven's Gem. Eli sounded like he recognized the name. Act asked if he knew his guild. Eli said he heard the Guildmaster was known for helping weak people. Act said that was wrong and made it clear he was not a kind person. Eli noted that Act mentioned Heaven's Gem again, but Act still insisted Eli was mistaken. The princess added that Eli was wrong because Act Enge was exactly that kind of person in real life. Act then told Eli he came to recruit him. Eli said there was no point because he believed he was useless. Act asked why he thought that. Eli said people saw him as useless and never noticed his true potential. Eli asked what he meant by true potential. Act explained that all humans were born with a talent, and most people never realized it. He said Eli was no exception and claimed Eli was on the same level as Ulgar, the spearman from the hero's party. Eli said Act was exaggerating because he always caused trouble wherever he went, to the point people called him a plague. Act already knew Eli was the one who protected everyone from the fire breath. Eli said it was a coincidence and he claimed he was a failure who could not do anything. Act told him to lift his head. He said that so-called coincidence was part of his real potential. He was confident because he had seen many people with different talents. He told Eli that his talent in magic was stronger than anyone else, and asked him to trust him and join his guild. Act's outstretched hand made Eli stop and think. He saw the honest look in Act's eyes and felt that Act was telling the truth and genuinely wanted him. Eli started to cry. He had already thought about quitting as an adventurer, yet the person in front of him was placing his trust in him. Eli decided to believe in him and try again. He took Act's hand and called him his guildmaster. The princess felt happy that he finally joined them. Eli said he would do his best even if it cost him his life. Act was pleased to hear it and said he would train him personally. With a strict look, he told Eli to get ready. Eli then assumed he was really going to die. Soon after, Eli tried to catch his breath because he felt he could not continue. His legs shook from the effort. Alistella grew confused and wondered what was happening. Act rested a practice sword on his shoulder and swung it to the ground. The strike landed with so much force that the ground burst open. He then asked in a strict tone if Eli had really said he could not go on. Eli quickly denied it and kept running while pulling the logs tied behind him. Since Eli's strength was in magic, the princess wondered why Act made him run in the first place. Act explained that it was exactly because Eli was a magician. Magic used mana to create strong energy, and all kinds of energy caused an equal reaction on the body. If someone had a weak body, they could not handle that reaction. Eli, without knowing it, was holding back his own power. To fix that, he needed to train his body so it could endure the strain. Alistella finally understood that Act had a deeper reason for this training. She had assumed he only wanted to force a beginner to obey. Act questioned why she even mentioned something like that. Eli fell to the ground and the two stopped talking. Act walked toward him and asked if he was already giving up, even calling him a loser. Eli did not move or answer. Act told him to get up, but Alistella said he was being too harsh and pointed out that Eli was already doing his best. Act turned away, but Eli asked him to wait. Eli pushed himself up like a newborn foal learning to stand. He said he could still continue. He knew Act had made this training plan for him so he could grow stronger and meet those expectations. He wanted to prove he was no longer the same loser. Act felt pleased to hear that and told him to show his true ability. Eli understood and kept running. Soon after, Eli finally collapsed. Act carried him away himself. Eli thanked him and said that Act's kindness was something he admired. Act told him he misunderstood. If he left him there and he became sick, it would ruin the schedule he had made. The princess suggested that Act should be more open with his kindness. Act told her not to be silly because he did not see himself as a kind person. Alistella simply giggled and agreed in a playful way. About 2 months later, Eli tried a spell called Nova Strike. A burst of flames came out of his wand and hit a training dummy. The dummy exploded. The pressure from the magic was so strong that it broke the barrier around the training grounds into pieces. Eli stood frozen, unable to speak. Alistella was amazed that he learned chantless magic of that level so quickly, and it even broke the barrier. She believed he was a genius. Eli ran to Act and hugged him while crying. He felt proud that he finally did it. He never knew he had this kind of talent for magic. He believed it was all thanks to the Guildmaster. Act told him not to think that way because Eli already had the talent. Act said Eli should be proud because the strength and effort belonged to him alone. Alistella watched Eli cry and thank Act with a gentle smile. Sometime later in Act's office at the guild, Frederica served tea while giving her report. She said that Eli had defeated a fire dragon with his new party. He had done it with Olga and a group of S-ranked adventurers. She added that Eli delivered the final hit with his magic. She also reported several more strong achievements. She said that because of Eli, other guilds had begun sending many inquiries. Act was surprised that the news spread so fast. Frederica said it only showed how others failed to see Eli's true potential, unlike her master. Suddenly, noise came from outside the office. A girl was telling someone that they could not enter without an appointment. Act and Frederica stayed quiet as they listened to the argument. A moment later, a man pushed the door open with a calm look. He was the leader of Eli's old team, and his members followed behind him. Gans said it had been a long time. Act asked what he meant. Gans answered with a rude tone that he had come to take Eli back. Frederica told them to leave since her master did not have time for rude people. Act told her it was all right, so she stayed silent and trusted he had a plan. Act stated that Eli was now part of his guild. Gans insisted that Eli still belonged to him and that he had the right to decide for him. Just then, Eli came over to greet Act. Gans glared at him like a madman while calling him his dear Eli. He believed Eli had finally become useful since the last time they met. Eli nervously asked what he wanted. It was clear that Gans came to pick him up and invite him back to their guild. Eli tried to refuse, but Gans asked him not to act so coldly. He claimed he would make use of Eli again, and asked if Eli felt happy about that while laughing. Suddenly, Act kicked Gans to the floor. Gans angrily asked what Act thought he was doing. Act held Eli by the waist and apologized. He said Eli was going through an important training and it was too early for him to leave his side, especially if it meant going with people he considered trash. Gans tried to attack, but he stopped when he sensed something. Frederica was releasing a strong magical presence and made it clear that her master was very busy. She said she would handle them if they caused trouble again and remove them from the place. Gans and his team felt cold sweat run down their backs. They wondered how someone could have that much mana. They walked away, but they still tried to threaten Act. Act told them not to bother since it would only be a waste of effort. That evening, Eli apologized to Act for causing trouble, and he even walked him back home. He called himself a failure. He said Act already did so much for him and that he only defeated the fire dragon because of Act, yet he still felt weak inside. He apologized for being a weakling. Act suddenly stopped walking and looked to the side. Eli bumped into his back and wondered what the Guildmaster saw. Act said it was disappointing, but he did not care. He continued walking toward an alley, and Eli followed. Gans and his team were actually following them. Eli asked why they were going into an alley, but Act gave no answer. Worried and confused, Eli kept apologizing and promised to train harder. He asked Act not to remove him from the guild. At that moment, Gans came out from a corner and hit Act from behind. Eli called out to his guildmaster, but Act was already knocked out on the ground. Gans and his team surrounded them right away. Eli asked what Gans was doing. Gans stepped on Act's head and said he came to take Eli for real this time. Before that, he wanted to pay back the guildmaster who kept looking down on them, so he started kicking Act again. Act tried to cover his face. Eli asked him to stop and wondered why he was doing it, but Gans kept kicking and stomping on Act. Gans asked Eli why he even needed to ask. He said Act made him angry all the time. Eli asked if that was the only reason. Those words made Gans pause, and he told the others to keep watch on Act. Gans moved toward Eli and apologized for removing him from the team before. He asked Eli to return so they could work together again. Eli refused. Gans asked again, then signaled his members to hurt Act more. Eli begged them to stop hurting his guildmaster. Gans lost his temper and ordered him to return to the team. Eli's legs weakened and he fell to the ground. Gans told him to say he would return so they would stop hurting Act. Eli trembled as he watched his guildmaster get kicked around like a rag. Act looked at him and told him not to worry about him and to think about what he truly wanted to do. He reminded Eli that his life belonged to him and hoped he would not choose something he would regret. Eli felt moved and finally made up his mind. He told Gans to leave in a weak voice. Gans asked what he said. Eli pulled out his wand and demanded that they release his guildmaster. A burst of flame shot out from his wand and struck Gans' team members, sending them crashing into a nearby wall. Gans was shocked and demanded to know what Eli was doing. Eli pointed his wand at Gans' face and said he would never return to his team. Gans grew even more angry and told him not to act proud like a brat. He said Eli should already know something important from when he was part of the team. He took out a dark knife and reminded him that it was coated with poison. He pointed it at Eli and teased him, asking if he felt scared. Eli stayed quiet for a moment, then admitted that it was scary. But he said failing to protect someone because he lacked courage was far worse. Small wind tornadoes formed around him without any chanting. Gans saw how bad the situation was becoming and tried to attack first. Eli answered that Gans was far too slow. He swung his wand and sent many windshot spells at him. Gans was thrown back. Eli said he would not give in to fear anymore and would not follow him ever again. Gans' team finally got back on their feet. They were still in pain, and Gans ordered them to stop wasting time and finish everyone off. Before anything happened, he suddenly heard bodies hit the ground. Act was already standing beside him. Gans turned in confusion and checked behind him, only to see his team down again. Act asked who Gans thought he was trying to kill. Gans demanded to know what Act had just done and why he looked completely unharmed even though they had beaten him earlier. Act explained that their weak attacks had looked slow to his eyes, almost like they were moving at the speed of a snail. As Gon stood up again, he realized that Act had taken their hits on purpose. Act pointed out that they were foolish to think he would ever drop his guard around them, and even mocked them for being the biggest fools of the day. Angered, Gon rushed toward Act with a poisoned knife. Act simply stepped aside, grabbed the arm holding the knife, and swung his fist. He released a fast series of punches that all landed cleanly. Gon was knocked out almost instantly. As he fell and lost his senses, he questioned what kind of strange moves Act had used and finally understood that Act was a true monster in battle. Act looked down at him and thanked him for being a useful stepping stone. Eli ran to Act and hugged him tightly. He believed Act had pretended to be weak for his sake, but wondered why he did it in such a roundabout way. Act pointed out that Eli had the mindset needed for his strong magic talent, and told him to stop acting timid. Eli understood that Act had taken the blows on purpose, so he could learn something from the fight. He appreciated the lesson but still felt troubled since he did not like being tricked, especially after feeling so worried. Act reminded him that he was a corrupted guildmaster who always got what he wanted, which made Eli pause for a moment before he burst into loud laughter. Later at Heaven's Gems, Ulgar visited the Guildmaster's office and said it had been a long time since they last met. Act allowed him inside. Ulgar could not believe that Act dared to use him as a messenger and asked where the new member was. At that moment, Eli entered the office and asked the Guildmaster if he needed anything. Ulgar was shocked when he saw Eli. Act then announced that he was banishing Eli from the guild. Eli felt confused and asked for the reason. Act said Eli was no longer useful in the guild, and told him to join the hero's party after leaving. Eli worriedly asked if he was worthy of being a hero's companion. Act asked if Eli was saying he had bad eyes. Eli quickly said that was not what he meant. Act told him to help people in need as a comrade of the hero from that point on. Eli clenched his fist and thanked him. He swore he would not forget everything Act had done for him. Act felt glad and turned to Ulgar, telling him to stop spacing out and take their new member. Ulgar finally snapped back to his senses and grabbed Eli's hand. He then suddenly asked Eli to date him. Eli felt confused. Ulgar said he had fallen for him the moment he saw him, and hoped they could save the world together, then get married and live a peaceful life in the countryside. Act watched them quietly, and thought Ulgar was an idiot. Eli refused to go out with him and apologized. Ulgar asked why. Eli said he already liked someone else, and planned to confess and marry that person after the mission. Ulgar could not believe it and dropped to his knees. Eli bowed to Act one last time and wished him well. Act told him to do his best. Eli said he would return once everything was done. After the boys left, Act commented that he had no idea Eli was seeing someone. He said he was surprised Eli had such skills. Hearing this, Frederica told Act that he was even more amazing for being so dense when it came to romantic feelings. In the neighboring country, the Kingdom of Seldea, an adventurer group was talking about how to work better together. The leader then said he had something important to say. He turned to their healer, Luna. He told her she was no longer needed in the hero's party and that she should leave. Luna was shocked. She asked Vulcan if he was joking. Vulcan, the hero, said Luna was useless now because they already had Mary, the party's saint, who could use healing magic. Mary only said humph. Another teammate added that the saint could do everything a healer could do and even more, so Luna was not needed anymore. Luna could not believe what she was hearing. They had been childhood friends and adventure partners. Then Vulcan gave the heaviest news. He held Mary's waist and made her sit on his lap. He said that they had started going out the night before. They even kissed each other in front of Luna. Vulcan said Luna was just a nuisance. Luna asked worriedly if they would be okay without her. She said that while Mary's healing magic was stronger, they did not realize that all of them were still too weak. She had been supporting them with her backup magic. Vulcan angrily asked what nonsense she was talking about. Mary told Luna not to lie. Luna insisted she was telling the truth. Vulcan also said it was strange for a healer to learn support magic. Luna shouted that she had learned it because he was too weak. Vulcan could not believe how messy things had become. He assumed Luna did not want to leave because she liked him. Luna denied it. Vulcan said he was not interested in a short, skinny girl like Luna. In comparison, he said Mary was beautiful and womanly, and he had no complaints. Luna could not believe what she was hearing. She angrily agreed to leave and slammed the door behind her. She ran outside. She could not believe Vulcan. He had chosen a woman he had just met over a childhood friend who had stayed with him all this time. She tripped and fell flat on the ground. She could not believe she had been banished for such a stupid reason. She wondered why she had even tried so hard. She felt so foolish. She cried her heart out in the street. Later that night, Alistella asked if they were looking for a healer this time for the heroes party that Act was forming. She never thought they would have to go to another country to find a new member. Act said that according to the reports, there should be one there. Just then, they saw people panicking in the street. When they looked straight ahead, they noticed a fire. They went closer and saw a large building burning fiercely. Act spotted some survivors by the side of the road and wondered if they should call for help. He ran to them and asked if they were okay. They said they were fine. Act looked closer. Their bodies were not hurt, but their clothes were burned. He also noticed the mana left on them. The old man asked them to call for help because there was a girl inside trying to save one of the children. Act used his powers to replay what had happened and saw a girl healing the old man a short time ago. He told Alistella to bring the knights to the place before he returned. Alistella asked what he meant and where he was going. Act calmly replied that he would also go into the burning building. Inside, Luna was trapped after some burned debris fell on her. She could not move at all. More debris fell, but Act kicked it away and saved her. Luna looked shocked. Act asked if she was okay. Luna asked how he was and said he had arrived at the perfect time. She told him to take the child and get out. Act told her that it was not possible because he would save them both. Luna said that was impossible since she could not move. Act studied the debris and grabbed a piece of burned wood. He said it was too early for Luna to give up. He pulled the debris. Luna screamed, afraid she would be buried, but then realized her legs were free. Act carried the young survivor. He asked Luna if she could walk on her own. Luna nodded while healing her leg. They ran together to escape the burning building. Outside, Alistella prayed hard for Act's safety. Soon, Act and Luna came out of the burning entrance. Alistella ran to him. Luna coughed and felt relieved that they finally made it outside. She asked if they were safe now. Act confirmed they were and handed the survivor to the knights. He said it was all thanks to Luna. The knights then moved out to check for more injured people and to start putting out the fire. Luna wondered how Act had gotten her out of the debris. Act explained that he could see the future, so he knew what would free her from the rubble. He had only chosen the best way to save her. Luna did not thank him. She said he did not need to bother saving her. Act asked what was wrong. Luna said she had just been banished from her party and that her most trusted childhood friend had betrayed her. She thought there was no point in trying hard anymore. In her mind, what really mattered was the talent someone was born with. And if a person was born without talent, it did not matter how much they tried because it was meaningless. Act disagreed with her. He gently tapped her cheeks. Luna felt flustered and asked what he was doing. Act told her to stay still so he could clean her face. After he cleaned it, he asked for her hand. He said that by looking at her hand, he could tell she was someone who always worked hard to improve her skills. Nearby, the child they had just saved returned with his parents. He thanked Luna for saving him. Act pointed out how she had healed everyone who was injured and patted her. He said she had done a good job. He noticed how she had thrown herself into the fire to save people she did not even know. He said that was what made her more special than anyone else in the world. Luna could not help but tear up. She said no one had ever told her that before. Act then told her to come with him. He promised to help her become someone who would shine brighter than anyone else. Soon after, Mary woke Vulcan. She was happy to see him awake. Vulcan sat on the ground leaning against a boulder. He asked what had just happened. When he looked behind the boulder, he saw his teammates fighting a huge behemoth. He remembered that they had been in the middle of the battle. He stood up, ready to lead them. The huge monster charged at them, and Vulcan confronted it confidently. He thought an attack like that would not work on him, but the monster easily threw him aside. His teammates watched as he flew through the air, bleeding at the same time. Vulcan felt confused about what was happening. Mary asked why he seemed distracted and told him to hurry and take down the monster. His teammates then retreated, telling him the behemoth was too strong for them. Vulcan tried to fight, but his legs shook and would not move. Mary asked what was wrong. Vulcan said he was fine. He grabbed his sword and moved into action. He decided to aim for the monster's front legs first. He had fought these monsters before and believed he could do it. Vulcan shouted loudly and swung his sword at the monster's leg. A loud crack echoed through the area. But it was not the monster's leg that broke. It was his sword. He stared, confused. The behemoth then gathered magical power in its mouth. Mary warned him that the monster was about to use its vortex breath and told him to dodge. Vulcan was too slow. The magical attack grazed his sides and he screamed in pain. The others tried to distract the monster, running away from it. Mary ran to Vulcan and told him not to move because he was badly wounded. Vulcan asked her to use healing magic on him. Mary said it was impossible because she had just treated a fatal wound. She explained she could not keep using such strong magic repeatedly. Vulcan got angry and called her ridiculous. He said Luna had been able to use healing magic over and over and ordered Mary to heal him immediately. Mary explained that healing magic required a lot of mental energy and she could not do it repeatedly. Vulcan shouted at her, calling her useless. Mary scolded him, saying she did not want to hear that from a hero who had been beaten so easily, and told him to focus on taking down the monster. The behemoth noticed the noise they were making. Their teammates warned Vulcan and Mary that the monster was coming after them. The monster roared as it charged toward them. Vulcan asked Mary to carry him, but she said her legs had given out. The two could only hold each other as they watched the monster lift its foot to stomp them. Blood splattered, but it did not come from them. It came from the monster's severed foot. Roselia appeared and asked if they were okay. Vulcan and Mary were shocked to see someone so famous as her in this situation. The rest of the team arrived and asked Roselia if she was all right. They warned her not to get too far ahead. Roselia apologized and said she had jumped in because she saw someone in danger. Misery scolded her for being reckless. Vulcan was more surprised by one of Roselia's team members. Luna stepped forward. Vulcan asked why she was with them. Luna told Roselia to dodge. The monster prepared another stomp. Vulcan and Mary screamed and closed their eyes. They were safe though, as they levitated away from danger thanks to Ride. The masked mage said it was no problem and asked Misery to act. Misery cast a gust of wind and created huge gale slicers around the monster. Mary asked what they were doing. She said behemoths had a carapace that blocked magic attacks and that the attack would not work. However, it worked very well, which confused her. Misery explained that the debuff magic had arrived at the perfect time and thanked Luna for it. Feeling shy, Luna said it was nothing. She then faced the monster and used binding magic to chain it down. Roselia told her team to give everything they had. Bridge and Anri joined the fight. Vulcan was stunned. He asked what was happening. Roselia's team was not even a hero's party, but they were so strong. In the end, the behemoth was defeated. Roselia felt glad. Ride said the quest was complete and thanked Luna. He said it was thanks to her that they had managed to take it down. Anri praised her for the great support. Misery agreed. Bridge nodded in approval. Luna said it was not her alone and that it was thanks to all of them. She also said it was thanks to their Guildmaster who had taught her about support magic. Everyone agreed that their Guildmaster was amazing as always. Vulcan got angry and shouted, asking how they dared to steal their target. Roselia stepped forward and apologized. She said his team looked like they were in danger, so she rushed in to help. She then asked Luna to heal him. Luna calmly cast a healing spell and immediately walked away. Mary got upset at her for doing such a quick and careless heal, but Vulcan was completely fine, as if he had not been injured at all. Vulcan angrily asked why she had been keeping such powerful healing abilities a secret. Luna said she was not hiding anything. She explained that she had strengthened her healing magic with her support magic, and her Guildmaster had taught her how to do it. She added that she had already called a carriage for them and suggested returning home. Roselia excused her team. Vulcan knelt on the ground and asked Luna to wait. She looked at him silently once and then turned her back. Vulcan felt crushed. Just like that, Roselia's team walked away.